Hi, everybody. I'm here with my good friend Shannon Rampe, sci-fi author and also writer of the novel Game Master, one of the blogs that's featured on our Discord. You should see a lot of things popping up. Great articles when it comes to role-playing games. I mean, you and I have been playing role-playing games probably together. I think if you added up, over 60 years, maybe. I mean, I've got almost 40 of them. I started playing when I'm 7. I'm almost 47 now, so that would be about 40 years of gaming just for me alone.
I started playing in 88. I started with the basic. It was the red box.
Yeah.
Had the cool artwork on the cover. It was like I think it was a Larry Elmore cover. I picked up a lot of other games there in the 90s. Mech Warrior and Shadowrun and Call of Cthulhu and Hackmaster and Adventure and like so many other games out there that were very different from D&D. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about why we choose certain games or like what chooses you to deviate from just playing Dungeons and Dragons.
After reading your blog, I did have that idea, and it was sort of a theory of mine. The games groups go to, and I'm using this as sort of a joke, like to deviate from Dungeons and Dragons, it's thought that it's the norm. That people and groups deviate because there's something that they drastically want D&D to do. They want it to be, more sci-fi, more this, more that. And then somebody comes up and says, hey guys, I've got this book. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. If you think of the games that you really latched onto and you enjoyed, was there something that they had that Dungeons and Dragons or another game that you were playing did not, and that sort of caused you to step away from one and dive into those specifically? And what were those things, if they did exist?
It's a great question, and I've spent I've spent the last week thinking about it, and I think it's when I see a game that promises me a certain type of story that I get to experience with my friends. That's usually the main thing that will draw me to want to pick up a game and play it, is like the game says, you get to play these kinds of stories. And I know that those are the kinds of stories that I probably can't do very well in D&D. So for example, a game like Mothership, which is like, it's basically Alien. I mean, I know there's an Alien RPG, but Mothership is also basically Alien the RPG. And you just can't really do those kinds of stories well in D&D, where everybody has piles of hit points and magical healing and all of that stuff. Like it's got to feel like tense and your characters have to feel like threatened and like they don't have all the tools to solve the problem. When I go to another game or when I'm interested in trying another game, sometimes it is in reaction to something I'm tired of with Dungeons and Dragons. I was tired of hour-long combats in 5th edition. I was like, gosh, I really want something different. I played Shadow Dark, and it was like fast combat. Characters are dying. You can roll up a new character in 2 minutes. It's just gritty. It's rules light. Everything goes fast. And I was like, wow, this feels really different.
The game that was really big for my friends was Iron Crown Enterprises Rollmaster. We didn't play Rollmaster originally. We played one of their games that was attached to the system. We played Middle Earth Role Playing. The MERP system.
Yeah.
And the game was intense. It was nothing but charts. Everything could kill you. Every roll of the die. Why did I play this game specifically? What it had was every single action was narrated. Swing a sword, look at a chart. That chart led to another chart, and then it said you would chop off his hand. You wanted to jump. It would tell you, okay, you jump. How high? You would then roll. And it wouldn't give you a number. It would say, you jump and you land deftly on your left foot, and your right hand is still open to make an action. It would give you these extreme things. So you would roll. And you could even, fall off a ladder. And if you rolled poorly enough, you could snap your neck and just die. Right? Like flat out. Doesn't matter what level your character is, level 1, level 10, level 50. That was it. You were gone. How is that different compared to like first edition Dungeons and Dragons and first edition of AD&D?
I think first edition is different. A lot of the mechanical rules are in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Everything about healing, everything about how the world worked and how characters survived and all that stuff. Those rules were all in the DMG. Player's Handbook was like rolling ability scores, your classes, spells, and that was about it. The game seemed mysterious to players because you didn't really know what the rules were. Other companies were looking at what D&D was doing and going, okay, this is cool, but like, how do we do other types of stories? How do you do longer narrative arcs? And so you had games like Vampire or Shadowrun or Call of Cthulhu that were sort of creating different ways to play.
In the teenage years, the setting had to be amazing. The setting had to be something that I thought was, just absolute radical, flying around on fire on a hoverboard, jumping through time. The more things and buzzwords and sci-fi and crazy stuff you could throw into it when I was a teenager, the more I wanted to at least pick up the book and I wanted to flip through it and check it out. And I would forgive a lot of problems with system and mechanics in exchange for a really cool setting. Things like Palladium Rifts, which was bonkers crazy, where just absolute madness.
Let's just shove the kitchen sink in here.
Right. All of the coolest things that, my addled 13, 14-year-old brain thought were cool, laser swords and robots and Ninja Turtles, all of that stuff.
Juicers and glitter boys. Oh yeah.
Right. And like wherever these things came up, none of that science worked. Everything was complete madness. And yet it was great and it was fun because every book was just bigger robots, bigger this, crazier aliens, crazier monsters, until we got to a point where we just needed this paradigm shift. And then you started getting into a lot more of the White Wolf games, and those games sort of coming out around that time. That sort of social. Call of Cthulhu's a great example. You were extremely weak. I think Call of Cthulhu was released in the 90s for sure, right? Like I remember
it was 80s, actually, early 80s.
Yeah, because I didn't get into it until late 90s.
I didn't either. I was in college when I first played Call of Cthulhu. And I don't think I would have enjoyed it to the same level if I'd have played it as a teenager.
Some of the books for the different settings really, especially in like the second edition of AD&D, really tried to address that, right? Spelljammer compared to Dark Sun, which was a ridiculous setting. D&D has a cadence to it. Meet in a tavern, go fight the monster, get some gold, get some XP, level up, fight the big bad. These epic tales that were Tolkien adjacent, some could say at the time. Let's just throw that out there. They followed that cadence. And even the games that I've played of D&D, I've never played a Dungeons and Dragons game, to me, that's run like a really tense Call of Cthulhu game. I could. I don't. After so many versions of D&D, I wonder how malleable it is. Is there a setting that really tries to be all-encompassing? If you want to tell a horror game, you can use our system. If you want to tell high fantasy, you can use our system. If you want to tell something that is more super space opera, you can use our system. I don't know.
So, I mean, this comes back to there's an age-old question, and if you poke around on blogs, you'll stumble across this question a lot, which is, does system matter? Or how much does system matter? And, the answer is yes and no. There are certainly systems that are written to create, designed to create certain game experiences, Mothership being a great example. Mothership goes so far as to have the Warden's Guide that tells you literally the structure of the types of stories that you're going to tell beat by beat. It has a 5-act structure for how to structure adventures for Mothership. Versus, something like Fate or GURPS, which are really these sort of open-ended systems designed to be able to run any type of game. And that relies a lot more on the GM and the group being comfortable with improvising around a rule system that they're really familiar with. So you're leaning less on the game's rules to help you tell those types of stories. So I think you can tell a creepy horror story with D&D, but it's hard. Like you gotta have a level of trust with your players. You gotta have, a mastery of the rules. you've got to be able to maybe, particularly with fifth edition, I think you got to be able to house rule some stuff in order to create that kind of experience. It might have been a little bit easier in earlier editions, but regardless, I think you can tell those types of stories in a D&D or in a D20 based system. But at some point you start to ask yourself, like, well, wouldn't it be easier if I just played this other game?
Of all the games that I've played, Dungeons and Dragons is the one that has gone through really strong transformations, right? Like
Oh yeah,
fifth edition, fourth editions, it's made huge
the switch from
changes.
second to third,
Mhm.
and from third to fourth, and from fourth to fifth
Right.
were massive. In some ways, I think fifth edition is a refinement and improvement on third edition, because of a lot of the systems and like the core D20 system. I think a lot of that's similar. But they're all third, fourth, and fifth are vastly different from anything prior to that, first and second edition. Talking about this idea of like going away from D&D to, for whatever reason, I'm curious, you go off and you play an Exalted, or you play Rifts, or you play Mothership. What do you bring back when you come back to play D&D again? Like, what kinds of things are you taking? Because that's one of the things that, like, I love trying new games. And then whenever I try new games, I'm always like, it gives me a new perspective on how to play D&D or any other role-playing game. So I'm curious, like, what are some of your highlights and takeaways of things that you've gone off and found in another game and then taken that back to D&D or other games?
Being terrified, honestly, is one of the biggest ones. I remember I played Call of Cthulhu for a while when I took a big break from D&D. When something came at you and it was so big and so powerful and you had no chance and you were just terrified of it, right? And your character, you had to act like you were scared, because you're used to playing Dungeons and Dragons. You're not scared of anything. That is a 56-foot tall, bone golem coming at us. That is a giant, terrifying thing. I should scream and run to the back of the room, but all of my NPCs would, right? If the player wouldn't, I was running a game, and it gave those other elements of the worlds that I ran more life. Dark Heresy did that a lot for me as well. There was a period where I was playing in that very brutal world where it's it's against the will of the emperor to even know how to read. Reading is knowledge. Knowledge is heresy. And those elements, and playing a character with that sort of mindset, and then bringing that back over to an evil empire, an inquisition, and things like that. Because those were, the boogeymen. But when you're actually playing as the boogeyman, it gives you that perspective to be able to apply it. Not so much rules, more to work within the rules to add those elements of role play to the gaming experience, either for my players or as a player. That's what I brought back the most.
It's about a shift in perspective, right? You go off and you play another game, and it gives you a new lens through which to look at D&D or any other game. The idea that how important giving players the opportunity to solve problems creatively rather than relying just on whatever's on their character sheet. There's a great short blog by Chris McDowell. He wrote the game Into the Odd and Mythic Bastion Land, but he has this theory that's real popular called the ICI doctrine. It's basically information, choice, impact. Give the players information, present a choice, and then make sure that whatever they choose has an impact. If you just do that sequence of things over and over, you will have a successful game no matter what system you're playing, no matter what you're doing. And learning that and then bringing that back to like 5th edition, it works just as good there as it does in Into the Odd. Mothership was a game where like figuring out how combat worked was crazy, because it doesn't hit like other OSR games or other D&D like games. You don't even have to roll for the monster to attack. It just gets to do what it's going to do, and the players get to respond to that. You can use combat and Mothership to create sort of mini stories, each round of combat being like its own story. And that idea that combat it's not just a simulation, it's not just a mini game,
Right.
which is how we typically treat it in D&D, but it is an opportunity for storytelling. Was something that I learned by running Mothership. And you can then bring those lessons back to your table no matter what game you're running.
I've been using that in Dungeons and Dragons for probably about the past 3 years, right? Like just these different approaches of hands off, let them run with it. Give them the information, let them run with it. And I've been playing games, like I said, for almost 4 decades now. And it's only within these past 4 or 5 years that thought even occurred to me to do.
Yeah.
Right? To even just say, what if I just don't roll at all? What if I let you roll and I respond to that part? There can be completely diceless games, yes, but a lot of my players are like, but the rolling's so fun and the dice are so nice. I want to roll the rolling game element, that sort of gambling element of it, of what's going to happen when I roll. What are my chances? There's a bunch to it. So they wouldn't let me run a completely diceless game, but the fact that I don't roll is really freeing. But I went from when I was younger, not wanting to adjudicate shit and wanting very well laid out rule systems where I didn't even have to think about what that sword is going to do to the guy, a million ways to die, to now I don't even roll dice and I just narrate, and the narration in response to them, and that back forth has been this evolution, right? But it's only hit like in these past couple of years, like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. I run a lot of stuff now where, like you said, I don't roll, or the only thing that I roll is like if there's a yes no question that my players ask me that I don't know the answer to, I'll roll a d6, and if it's 1 to 3, it comes up in their favor, and if it's 4 to 6, it comes up not in their favor.
Yeah, the flip a coin.
So I was running Old School Essentials again last year, and I started to take some of the lessons learned from Mothership, where I would indicate what the monsters were going to do at the beginning of the round. I would say, you see these, the owlbear looks like it's going to go after Charlie the magic user, and it's probably going to bite his face off. So, what are you guys going to do? It's that information choice impact thing again, where, here's the information. The owlbear is going to go after the magic user. What is your choice? Now let's see what the impact of that's going to be.
For a lot of the game masters that I would play with in the early days, it was definitely up to us to create the story and combat. They would set up the monsters, they would do the rules, but then we would have to find ways to make that combat interesting narrative action sequence. It wasn't just there, right? Yeah. We run up, we beat up the orc, we throw it into a river. If we wanted to get into it and we wanted to get more involved, then hopefully our game master was feeling kind enough to allow us to do some crazy stuff, like, grab a ladder and use it to grab a bunch of orcs by the neck and throw them off a building or something, right? Fun stuff like that.
I'm curious, as I was thinking about this subject of like, I've played D&D and I'm maybe tired of some aspect of it, or I'm unhappy with some aspect of it, so I go looking for something else. Your problem was more like you were unhappy because combat is slow, and instead you got hung up on this one mechanic, and you went off and picked another game because it had a different version of that mechanic that you thought was going to be great, but actually everything else in that game is worse or has its own problems, or you create your own rules to redo, say, initiative, and now you've just sort of pasted over the problem with a new problem.
I have Jenga towered a game more times than I can count. Yes, that happens to me all the time. I mean, and I have a let's say it's a penchant for doing that. It is true that I will dive into D&D, and there are things that I will adjust. Like for example, I bonus action to drink a potion, right?
Yeah.
Right, rule, right? Something that I did it before it became cool, right? You don't need to attune to items that are +1 or lower, right? You just want a +1 sword, get a +1 sword, because we're in Eberron. Magic's everywhere. So everyone is just naturally attuned to low level or like rare level magic items, right? Mm-hmm. That caused some problems. And what I had to do was I could either take away the rule or I could hopefully kludge and adjust everything up or change other things. And that one time it worked, but so many times it does not. And what I've wound up doing is accidentally pulling the thread that causes the shirt to unravel.
When I'm running a game for the first time or two, I try to run it rules as written.
Rules is written. I try.
Because I want to understand what the designer's intent was before I start tinkering with things.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like, everybody should tinker. Like, you should homebrew rules and try different things. But more often than not, what I've learned is that usually my fixes aren't better. Like, I'm fixing the wrong problem.
Yeah.
Usually the problem is I just need to play a different game that lets me tell a different type of story, not I'm unhappy with the initiative system.
I rarely try to change things. I always try to add something that wasn't there before. And I think that stopped around 3rd edition. While a lot of my other friends, they're like, what are you doing? Do not mess with the sacred text. Like, no, it's cool. It's cool. It'll work. No. The game gave you this world in which you lived, this sort of like this, but everything about it could be changed, swapped out, moved. You could really kind of make it your own. And we started right out the gate making them our own. And because we didn't understand the rules, we had a very unique experience to just us at that point in time. And that made them timeless. And it still does. We still talk about them because of that.
Yeah, that harkens back to this idea that, like, now when people want to learn how to play D&D or any game, they can go on YouTube and watch 10,000 videos and see how other people do it. And pre-internet, or even in the early days of the internet, we didn't have that. You learned how to play a game by just picking up the rule books and reading them and sitting down with your friends and being like, okay, I think this is how this should go.
Yeah.
I don't know, but here's how we're going to do it, and making it your own. And so the cultures that developed around different play styles or different games were very localized to your table or your group of friends, like maybe the few different gaming groups that you played with, rather than everybody playing this sort of like broad play style that, is common, that everybody knows about. I think newer editions of D&D, not that we can't tinker with them, obviously we can.
Sure.
But they sometimes have unforeseen consequences. Earlier editions of D&D, and probably older stuff like Shadowrun and things, they were a bunch of kludged together mechanical systems.
Oh, yeah.
And that made them hard to learn. And it seemed crappy at the time. But if you're trying to tinker with things, in the old games, you could be like, okay, I don't like this initiative system. I'm going to rip it out. I'm going to replace it with something else. You could do that without touching any of the rest of the game. Now we have these like unified D20 systems, which seem great on the surface because it's easy to teach people. All you got to do is roll D20, add a number to it, try to hit a target number.
Right.
That's the entire game. Great. In a modern D20 game, if you try to change one of the core systems, you impact lots of other stuff that you might not want to,
Mm-hmm.
Ability score, you change ability scores. They affect everything. You change the class progression for a class. Now it's unbalanced compared to other classes. You change initiative. Now you've altered the perceived power level of some classes, which, have bonuses or things that allow them to go faster in initiative. So one bonus round question: has there ever been a time where you were like, I want to play this game specifically because this mechanic sounds really cool to me?
Wraith, the Oblivion.
What was the mechanic?
The shadow system. Your character is a ghost. They have died.
Yeah.
And the ghost is linked to something in the real world. A mother you love, a sister you want to take care of. It's got to be something so powerful that that Oblivion's pull could not pull you. You're anchored by this thing, this person, this idea, and your shadow is played by another player, and it is the dark voice in the back of your head trying to destroy your anchors and send you screaming into oblivion to become an enemy for the dark power. And they are actively working against you. make your gun point to the left and shoot the constable as opposed to shooting the bad guy running away, for example, or to take over your body entirely and run around at night while you have no memory of what happens. Things like that. And the few times that I've run Wraith, the game ran itself. They would run their shadows like 25% of the time, and they would actually have physical masks that they would put up, or ways that they would talk, or body language where you'd see a player's body language change, and they would get into this idea, this altered self, this darker version of their psyche that was trying to ruin them. That system, I haven't seen anything like it, and it worked so well when I ran it with the people I chose. I've never been able to emulate it or found a game where I felt that it would suit. Only in a system like that game, the way it's written, the plot, the story, only in that, so far, I found could that core element actually have play.
Yeah, that's a good one for Wraith. The closest thing that I've seen to something like that is like in early editions of D&D, it was very common for you to have like hirelings or retainers that would work for your character. And so like it wasn't just you going in the dungeon, you have like 2 or 3 guys working for you. And so like giving your hireling to another player to run. Because the default is like, I've got this hireling, I want him to go down the hallway and check for traps.
Yeah.
Well, if another player is playing that hireling for me, like they're gonna be like, hell no, I'm not going down the hallway. Screw you, buddy. You're not paying me enough for that.
Robin and his minstrels, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. My answer to that question is a quick and simple one, which is I got really excited about Mothership when I learned about, one was the idea that it was a horror game that has no rules for stealth. The absence of mechanics being intentional and forcing players to solve problems creatively because there was no rule in the game that they could just roll a die. So that was part of it. But also the other part about Mothership is the death save. When a player goes down, the GM rolls a die to see what it's their death saving throw, essentially. And you roll a die and you hide it under a cup. And that remains in a sort of Schrodinger's cat kind of state.
I was about to say Schrodinger's
dead. Are they not dead?
Yeah.
Until another player goes over to the body to check them. And then you get to reveal the die and show whether or not they're dead or just horribly maimed.
That's a really fun mechanic.
I know, isn't it? Everybody's like, are they dead? Are they not dead? I don't know. I'm going to check. I pull up the cup, and they're dead. Their limbs are hacked off.
Man, I own Mothership. I got it for Christmas. I got the big box with all the stuff and all of the little zines and everything and the different scenarios to play. And I've read all of those, but I haven't gone through the game rules that much. I just started reading all of the cool scenarios.
The scenarios.
And I didn't get through all of them. The few I got through, I'm like, these are fantastically fun. Now I just need to learn what all these words mean because I didn't read the rules yet.
Yeah. Well, the rules are pretty easy. So
yeah, it's a small book. So all right, man. Is there anything you want to plug or?
I have a book coming out next summer called Gods of Sky and Dust. I would love for more people to know about it. So go to my author website, shannonrampe.com, and sign up for my newsletter. And then you will get to learn all the cool things about this book before it comes out. You'll be in the know. And also check out my blog, The Novel Game Master, where I talk about tools and tips for running RPGs of all different types. Well, this has been great.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for chatting with me, dude, about all this stuff. And catch you in a couple of weeks for another chat then.
Yeah, sounds good.